It is exactly 1:05 Eastern Standard Time, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off here. For those of you who have been here for about 10 minutes, apologies for sounding like a broken record, but we wanted to give everybody a chance to jump in. Um, so on today's presentation, Mark Andrews, who's on the call, who you're looking at right now, and myself, Greg Lepore, we've got about 30 to 40 minutes of content that we're going to run through. Our presentation is obviously entitled AI and Market Research, Getting to the Right Insights. So real quick before we go ahead and get started, you should be able to chat with us, ask questions along the way. We'll save about 10 or 15 minutes at the end to do a Q&A. And this session is also being recorded. So if there's folks that were not able to join this call from your team, this link will be shared on the Verilogue website. It'll also be shared on YouTube, and we will follow up with attendees afterwards to make you aware of that link. So without further ado, we are here to talk about using AI to get to the right insights. The onset of artificial intelligence is obviously re-envisioning what it means to be a market researcher and what it means to conduct market research. So the three-step process that Mark and I are going to talk about today, and we'll introduce ourselves in just a second here, but just to kind of set the stage, we're going to talk about essentially three parts for getting to the right insights using AI. The first one being developing a single source of truth for your brand, for your therapeutic area, for whatever it may be that you're working in. And really, this is a note to, with the onset of digital marketing 15 to 20 years ago, data became the name of the game. And so most brands, most companies, most pharmaceutical manufacturers are trying to wrangle massive data lakes. And the challenge with those data lakes, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper, is that you end up having insights and data scattered across multiple teams, multiple partners, multiple vendors, and multiple individual contributors. So the first thing we'll talk about is how to create that single source of truth for your data, using your data and for your brand. The second piece of the puzzle that we're going to talk about is enriching any data sets that you already have. AI is only as good as the data that's fed into it. So if it's not being fed all of the relevant data it needs to give you a clear-cut answer to your marketing question, it's not going to suffice for what you need it to do and what you want it to do. So we'll talk about enriching the data that you already have. And then the third piece here is learning how to prompt AI. So when it comes to utilizing AI, there's massive differences in terms of who's using it, to what extent they're using it, and how well they're using it. Prompting AI is an art. So Mark is going to talk to us about how to craft the right prompt to get the answer, to get the information that you need. And so with that, Mark and I will do quick introductions here. So I'm Greg Lepore. Pleasure to meet everybody. Some of you I think I've spoken with in the past. A lot of you I haven't. So I'm product lead here at Verilogue. So for folks who don't know what Verilogue is, Verilogue's essentially been around for almost 20 years now, and was a pioneer in point of care exam room dialogues. So essentially what we do is we capture conversations candidly at the point of care within the exam room between patients, physicians, and also caregivers when and where they're involved. This is what most of you probably know us for if you've heard of Verilogue in the past. All of those dialogues are uploaded to a database called Reveal. Used to be called Reveal MR. We have recently rebranded to Reveal Market Research. And so within Reveal, there are three products that we're going to be talking about today. The first one being Reveal Dialogue. So Reveal Dialogue is essentially those point of care conversations that, as I mentioned, many of you know us for. The second product we're going to talk about is Reveal Connect. So Reveal Connect is an example of a single source of truth where you can combine those point of care exam room insights with other data sets that you may already have, whether it's first party owned data or whether it's third party marketing data you're getting from different vendors and different sources. The third product we're going to talk about is Reveal Vision, which is our AI, essentially LLM chatbot that you and your team can prompt to get deeper and quicker insights into what's happening at the point of care, as well as deeper insights into other data sources that you may have. So there's kind of two pieces to this story. There's the product side of it, and then there's the strategy and the expertise and the consulting side of it. So give Mark a chance to introduce himself here. Mark Andrews is the founder of AI Profits.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Andrews. I'm founder and CEO of AI Profits, and I created this organization several months ago to help enable humans to get the most out of their historic internal data across processes and operations. And really what I do is I help align people with the actual organizational goals in a top-down and bottom-up perspective to get the most out of their data. So a lot of this in this particular discussion has to do with coaching and building out repeatable ways of using patient journey information, internal and external medical and healthcare related information, and building out the human skills associated with leveraging this information to make decisions.
Yep. So as we said, there's kind of two pieces of the puzzle here when you talk about building a single source of truth, enriching your data, and then prompting the AI. The first one is the product lens. So the first thing you're going to need to do is make sure that you have the right products in place to be able to do all of this work. And so as we move through this presentation, we'll talk in the context of the products that are offered here at Verilogue. You may have products that you're using on your own that your organization already has, and that's totally fine. But we want to at least make sure that we're speaking to you about what you should be looking for and how you should be utilizing those products. And then the second piece here, as Mark mentioned, and as we mentioned earlier, is sort of the strategy and consulting side of things. So whether you're using Verilogue products or products that you already have, want to make sure you're getting the most out of those products by using Mark's four-step process here. So with that said, as I mentioned, chapter one here is sort of creating that single source of truth for your brand, for your therapeutic area, for whatever it may be that you're working on. And the first thing that we want to talk about is kind of the old insights behavior versus the new insights behavior that Mark, myself, and others are trying to instill into the marketplace. So the old insights behavior is essentially what you're looking at on screen right now. Projects often begin with siloed data, slow insights, and because of both of those things, missed opportunities. So insights and data are being generated across your brand teams, sales, marketing, medical, and so forth and so forth. And so all of those insights and data are captured within very long PowerPoint decks, Excel tables, with thousands, hundreds of thousands of rows, PDFs. All of those individual documents are uploaded to some sort of a file management or knowledge management system, typically SharePoint. And so when you extrapolate that process out to not just the brand teams within your organization, but also to the creative agencies that you're working with, the media partners that you're working with, and the data and tech vendors that you're working with, you end up with data and insights that are scattered across, again, individuals, teams, different knowledge management systems. And historically, for the last 20 plus years, the role of the market researcher has essentially been to wrangle all of that information, try to synthesize it, and then become the go-to for your marketing counterparts. This has never quite functioned the way that it has been intended to for these 20 plus years. Different organizations are able to wrangle this to differing degrees, but I think most of the folks on this call would agree that when you go to kick off a project on the marketing side, whether it's creating an advertisement that you're gonna pay to share on Facebook, creating a banner ad, creating a video, the very first question is, where is that slide that so-and-so put together 6 months ago? What deck is it in? Where has it been shared? And it's essentially creates a mess of a data lake.
And this brings us to our next part of human behavior, is that the historic way of looking, analyzing, and truncating data is completely changed with AI. When we think about the behavior today, about 42% of the average corporate work week is spent reading, answering emails, and communicating internally with stakeholders. As insights professionals, this is even higher because of that association with simplifying and storytelling with the data that you are then providing to your stakeholders. So a lot of how we perceive human behavior and using AI comes down to perception. It comes down to role, it comes down to operations and the systems we're working in. And really what this is all is a means to output is that 10 to 20% of our day as insights and data professionals can be optimized through the usage of AI. It could be a little bit different for one person on the brand team versus someone who's more deeper in the insights. But in totality, there's a lot of synergies and a lot of areas that we could optimize across our processes with AI.
Which leads us to sort of the new insights behavior that Mark just teed up there. And it's essentially, to put it into one sentence, it's moving away from knowledge management and moving towards the consolidation and creation of an insights platform. So the vision here is essentially what if instead of each of the partners that you're working with collecting their own data, synthesizing that data into insights, and then sharing those insights out via, a 40 to 50 slide PowerPoint deck? What if that data and those insights were immediately shared into a platform that everybody who is touching your brand has access to? Essentially, what you would have is you would have all of the extended team for your brand making decisions off of the same shared insights. And so there are different ways of doing this. At Verilogue, again, we have a platform called Reveal Connect that will quickly demo here. And so again, this is just one example of what a single source of truth might look like. But with Reveal Connect, you essentially have AI infused throughout. You have the different stages of the treatment journey for your patient with a quick, short, snappy AI generated summary of what's happening at each of those stages. Moving down, you have a table of core insights for different segments, different patient segments that might be interested in your brand or engaging with your brand. You have profiles for who those patients are. You have the barriers and motivators that are stopping them or compelling them to take action. You have different perceptions and attitudes. You have critical decision points. And then on top of all of that, bringing in those third-party data sources as well. So marketing competitive data, maybe looking at, website traffic to your brand, yourbrand.com versus a competitor's brand.com, looking at content intelligence in terms of what's being shared and spoken about on social media, and then conversational intelligence in terms of what folks are searching on Google and what those search analytics are saying. And again, the idea here is bringing all of that data and insights into one shared platform so that all the different folks who are touching your brand are making decisions off of the same set of information. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is enriching your data set, making sure that when you create that single source of truth, that you have all of the different data points associated with your brand before you start thinking about plugging in your AI to query it for questions related to your marketing efforts. So in terms of enriching the data, there are three kind of data focal points you should be thinking about. The first one is obviously first party and owned data, which are insights created by your team, by your market research team. The second piece here is dialogue. So the point that we want to make when it comes to Reveal Dialogue is insights generated at the point of care are really the point of care is essentially where everything else that you've done comes together. That 9-minute conversation that plays out between patients and physicians encapsulates all of the experience and persona mapping you've done, all of the segmentation that you've done, all of the competitive and landscape work that you've done, the content strategies you put together. All of that comes to fruition or doesn't come to fruition in that 9-minute conversation. So really want to drive home the point here that dialogue data is golden when you talk about how your brand is performing and what's going on in your therapeutic area and in your space. And then the third piece of data that we want to encourage folks to think about when building their single source of truth is public and licensable data. So these are insights at the speed of the market. This is things like FDA data, search data from tools like SEMrush, Google Analytics, paid media data from tools like Pathmatics, like QVIA data. And again, plugging all that in with your dialogue data and with your first party and own data to give your AI a truly all-encompassing picture of what's happening in your therapeutic area and with your brand. So Mark, I'll kick it over to you to give a quick case study here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of how I perceive data is almost as each data piece as a specific iceberg, offering its own unique strengths and weaknesses across the entire picture. And what you start to see is that by being more proactive with data and using AI, you can shorten the time to make that decision and create a less of a reactive dependency on a data signal, but more of a proactive means and vehicle to access that data in totality with the other data to inform a decision. So what we're going to discuss now is a case study about a publicly available data set, specifically the FDA data set, which is composed of around 6 or 7 sub-data sets, each API'd to the FDA data site. So what we had here is a particular problem where FDA research can be tricky to mine. When you think about the human approach of finding FDA data, a lot of it goes to Google, a lot of it goes to that historic way of searching for the web. But as we're thinking about using that data in comparison and on top of our brands, our specialties and disease states, we see this opportunity to not only use it as a supplement, but to use it as a tool intertwined with our data. So in this area, we look at FDA research as a large area that has lots of long taxonomies, long words, a lot of verbiage that can be mined. Think about the text to text type approach. And in this area, we had a team that was essentially working through an 8 to 10 hour process a week, which is very common as you see in certain landscapes when it comes to FDA related data, specifically in the device front. And what we really tried to do is truncate that time of getting to that specific insight. So we're looking for a needle in a haystack with a laser focused approach. And by carefully bringing in segments of this data set into our data lake, we can essentially shorten and truncate that time. So think about that needle in the haystack approach when you're looking for a specific insight into a ingredient or a portion of the disease state journey as it pertains to a specific product or a specific formula. This is a way that you can really truncate that process and tap into an openly available data set using AI. When we think about this type of approach, it's very much a crawl, walk, run, because what happens is occasionally we're building out another AI tool, and we do not want that tool to sit on the shelf. In leadership perspective, a lot of AI tools, things like Copilot or ChatGPT, could be viewed as another cost center. So as we're approaching that goal of really trying to refine the time it takes us to get to that insight, we're also focusing on this bottom-up perspective of bringing AI literacy and upskilling the team to think about looking for data in a new way. So as we go through this, there's testing, there's creation of resources, and there's essentially this guide that's output to certain members of the team that are taken in as champions. And then it is their job to essentially upskill and bring all of these use cases and resources to their team to help scale. So when we think about bringing in third-party data sets, second-party data sets, or using first-party data, it is really a team approach, because what you're going to need to do is align that data with your data science resources and the leadership to understand what those expectations are. So what's next for tools like this? What's next for AI tools that we're building versus buying and using inside of our organizations? AI is not always the first answer. Sometimes it could be the second. A lot of times it could be the third. In some cases, it's just getting clean data in a structured way into an area that we can attach AI on top. Sometimes it's really connecting to the data and ensuring it's actionable. A lot of data that we see doesn't quite have an end lever that can be manipulated in the end of the day. So we really need to focus on what we as humans can control as an output of our data. And lastly, data accessibility is a very, very big piece of the picture. Data must be accessible, it must be visible, and it must be almost democratized in such a way that teammates can uplift these strategies together and use AI together. Because what happens is the way I use AI is going to be different than the way you use AI. But it's the human perspectives that allow us to really get to those deep insights hidden beneath the layers that might ultimately take us a lot longer to get to 5 years ago.
And so to follow up on Mark's point about how one person uses AI versus the next, just to kind of double down on that FDA case study, if that FDA data has not been plugged into your single source of truth, when you go to prompt your AI for questions about your brand or your therapeutic area, your AI is gonna give you basically an incomplete answer. It's gonna make it seem like it's very complete because it is complete based on the data that it has access to. But if it doesn't have FDA data, if it doesn't have first party owned data, second party data, third party data to crunch on, it's not going to give you a complete answer. And so essentially you'd be making short-sighted decisions based on what you believe to be a complete data set. So we're going to pivot now, and if there are questions related to that second piece about enriching the data, feel free to drop them in the chat. But we're going to pivot now to kind of the third piece of the puzzle here, which is prompting your single source of truth. So once you've identified a platform or a product or some means of bringing all of your data and insights together, once you've enriched that data set, the third piece is learning how to prompt the AI. And so when it comes to AI, context is key. again, to further emphasize Mark's point about how one person utilizes AI versus the next, the quality of the input is going to determine the quality of the output. And there are a couple things that you should be thinking about in terms of prompting and in terms of context when you go to vet AI tools or build one within your organization. So the one that we're going to demo here quickly is Verilogue's own product called Reveal Vision. And essentially, on the window on the left, it might seem look a little bit small for folks, but essentially what's happening is we had prompted the AI and asked it this question: help me summarize how patients and HCPs discuss kidney function in the context of type 2 diabetes to pinpoint message testing ideas for my marketing team using dialogue data. And the response that you see generating on the screen was essentially based on the transcripts that were analyzed. HCPs explain chronic kidney disease to type 2 diabetes patients in various ways, focusing on the connection between diabetes and kidney health. They often discuss protein leakage in urine as an early sign of kidney effects from diabetes, emphasizing the importance of monitoring kidney function through regular blood and urine tests. And so essentially what you're getting through this AI-generated response is a quick summary of what's happening, not only at sort of the symptomatic stage, the initial onset of symptoms, but also through to diagnosis, also through to treatment options, also through to prescription. And one of the big things that I want to tout just in terms of our tool Reveal Vision is the opportunity to see the evidence for where the AI got its response. So I don't know if you can see, but you will be able to see in a second here. There's the opportunity to click Show Evidence, and what's going to happen when you click Show Evidence is the AI is going to give you the exact conversations and the exact snippets from those conversations that it based its response on. And so in this example here, we're just looking at an AI response generated on top of dialogue data from the point of care. But there was a question that was mentioned in the chat a couple minutes ago around the question was essentially, how is this data categorized? Can it be categorized? And so the answer to that is yes. And so if you extrapolate out this example, when you click on Show Evidence, you might have not just a snippet of a conversation that happened at the point of care, but you might also have a PowerPoint presentation that was created 3 years ago. Maybe it's a qualitative interview that you did with an HCP or with a patient that's related to this topic. So on the back end, uploading the right data, categorizing the data in a way that makes it the evidence easily findable and easily available to sort through is also an imperative part of this. And so with that, as I mentioned earlier, context is key when it comes to prompting, whether it's Reveal Vision or whether it's an AI tool that you've already purchased or whether your team is building. So I'll kick it over to Mark here to kind of talk about this process.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of different theories and methodologies with which formula leads to the most effective prompt. And what my best suggestion is to folks is to try what works best for you, but to break it down into ways that you can add in almost as a Mad Lib specific pieces of text or expectations. So in this particular slide, what we're going to talk about is how to prompt with the approach of research. And a lot of what we do as research professionals might differ pending our particular remit as a company, whether or not we're more hands-on with data, whether or not we're more strategic with the messaging, or whether we're more managerial with the research process in totality, it all changes how we approach prompting. But the goal here is to become more effective with being more proactive, with getting to insights, and to try to really get that one prompt, that output that is golden. A lot of times I like to talk about it as a bit of like pulling a lever from a slot machine. We've all had that perfect output before, and we want to be able to maintain that level of accuracy and quality with our prompting. So here's a little bit of an approach with how I teach people with how to prompt. So the first part is to start with a goal. And a lot of times as research, we're looking for a particular goal as it pertains to a section of the patient journey or as an output to develop some type of message or some piece of insight. So really start with that. In this particular example, we'll say I'm preparing for a research study to progress my team to indicate if there are any risks with this roadmap for this type 2 diabetes study. And what you're starting to see is by picking and choosing each part of these formulas, you're able to start with a goal, whether that's analytical based, summarize based, looking for a specific nugget of information, or to execute a particular task, and you're associating that with a particular background. This could be a type of research, it could be a methodology, it could be a specific subtype of research that was hired as a one-off. Really think about that as an object that you're using to kind of build in. On top of that, we have expectations. So what are we essentially looking to do with this prompt? Is it to produce something? Is it to execute a task? Is it just to send a message? Sometimes it's the simple stuff that really saves us the most time. But then we're finally thinking about the particular source. So when we're putting these things together, you're essentially putting together a prompt that's helping you complete or look for a certain research task, and it's also providing a particular source to pull from. Now, this is also important because going back to Greg's discussion earlier, the source has such a huge impact on the accuracy of the output. For instance, if you have a source that has a load of data and it seems to be taking up a large portion of output, maybe you need to look at reducing the focus and the weight of that source in the output. So really, as you're working through insights professionals, it's up to you to figure out how you want to prompt and how you want to approach these things. But my suggestion is to try to just start out with 5 to 10 minutes a week, really focused on a hyper-specific task. And then as you start to expand, bring in additional sources and start to add it into the complexity of the prompt. And as you know, you'll start to see the output almost immediately. But that's the other area where we as insights professionals really have to be adamant about looking at the output, its accuracy, and standing by how we move forward with that insight. Because we are then guiding our teams and our stakeholders with this data to inform a decision. So remember, you are kind of at the tip of the spear when it comes to this new wave of AI and using data to grow. And this is a great way with how you can formulate emotion, bias, in or out of prompting throughout your process.
And so one of the things that Mark touched on there was essentially adding into, crafting a prompt and then refining it over time. And so Mark, I want to kind of put you on the spot here and ask you a question that I think we've gotten fairly often. And I'll preface this by saying, so one of the other great things about Verilogue's Reveal Vision product is, I don't know if folks can see, but on the left side of this screen here, you have all of your previous sessions of when you've engaged with the AI. So let's say you were asking a question around a competitor, and then you started a new chat and you asked a question around a particular patient segment or a particular HCP segment. And the inclination of folks engaging with AI for the first time seems to be to utilize AI as if it's a Google search bar, wherein every time I have a new question, I open a new session and I generate a new prompt and I ask a new question. What you end up having is, 20, 50, 100, even more individual sessions of when you engaged with the AI. And so, Mark, the question I want to ask you is, when do you think it's worth starting a new session versus continuing an old session when it comes to prompting AI?
That's a really good question. I've started to realize that the bias, specifically on the API with the ChatGPT function, does start to fall off a little bit around 7 to 10 times, meaning that as I'm speaking to it, it's going to continue injecting my bias, and that will then reflect upon the output. So once I usually get to that end goal, I'll start a new chat. Because to your point, as you're progressing and as you're adding in, the psychopathy approach can actually push you to having a particular bias, and you don't want to be pushed into that area too far, if you will.
So you heard it here, folks, 7 to 10 times before you want to start thinking about a new session. So on that point, if there are any questions around how to prompt effectively, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we're coming up to the end of our slide. We're here to just kind of reiterate. We talked about 3 steps for getting to the right insights. Number 1, creating a single source of truth. Verilogue offers a product called Reveal Connect to help folks do that. There are other products on the market. There are some companies that we've spoken to who are doing this internally. But kind of the key points when it comes to creating a single source of truth are essentially the interface and the interface and the users that you have within that platform. So ensuring that it's a joint sort of combination of users, not only from your brand team, but also from the different partners and vendors that you're working with. And again, the idea there is that everybody who's touching your brand is working off of the same set of data and the same set of insights. The second thing that we talked about was enriching your data set. So you might have first party owned data, which you probably do. You might have third party marketing data. Do you have data from what's happening actually within the exam room? Do you have APIs that are sending information from the FDA website into your single source of truth? If you don't, that's something that you want to take into consideration. And then the last piece here is prompting the AI. So as we talked about, Verilogue offers Reveal Vision, which is essentially our AI prompting tool that's been built thus far on top of dialogue data. Mark talked about how to prompt AI, that four-step process for giving it the right context, generating maybe 7 to 10 questions before you want to start a new session. And the last thing here, and Mark will give you the opportunity to comment on this, is if you're looking for product solutions, Verilogue has these 3 different products that could be a starting point for you and your team on your path towards prompting the AI and getting to the right insights. But if you're just looking for consulting, sort of more strategic services, that's where Mark's AI Profits comes in.
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you, Greg. And yeah, my focus is really on the humans that are working behind the data. I think that there's a lot of amazing data, technology, and infrastructure in place. But what I really think is the next opportunity is connecting the dots with enabling humans to be better with this data. And that's one of the reasons why I just love market research data professionals so much, because I really see you as that next tip of the spear for the evolution of data, especially in an enterprise sense. So thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. This has been a great session. And what I'll do is I'll throw my LinkedIn in the comments as well if anyone wants to ask me any questions outside.
Wonderful. Yeah, so with that, we've kind of reached the end of our slide over here. So we've got Mark and myself's email addresses, but we do have a couple questions in the chat. So we'd love to open it up at this point to some discussion, Q&A, if you have comments or if you have questions, or if you want to even go back to any of the slides that we presented, any step in that 3-step process, we're more than happy to do that. So the first question that we have here is, in terms of those 7 to 10 responses from the AI assistant, or I guess the question is it 7 to 10 responses from the AI assistant, or is it 7 to 10 total between you and the AI?
I would say it's 7 to 10 total between that chat instance. It has a bit of a short-term memory, so each time you start a new chat, it kind of refreshes itself, and then as you're progressing, it refines itself and refines itself. So I do suggest when you move on to that new topic or that new area, then start a new chat, and it should refresh that short-term memory of the AI. And that's particular to ChatGPT, to Gemini, to Claude, and to Copilot.
We've got a couple other questions here. So just for folks on the call, we have attendees here from the agency world. We have attendees here from the brand world, from the manufacturer side of things. And so one of the questions that we got is, do only Verilogue employees have access to Reveal Vision, or can agency employees submit requests for projects? The answer to that question is the latter piece of the question itself. So if you are within one of the agencies within Publicis Group or elsewhere, and you're interested in utilizing Reveal Vision, this can be utilized by those teams, and just reach out to myself and we can get a conversation started about what brand and you need this for and what questions you have. There's another question here. Are you recommending that we start with Reveal Connect as the AI tool for market research versus tools like GenCanvas, ChatGPT, etc.? So, Mark, let's start with the ChatGPT side of things. In terms of thinking about what AI tool might be best for my brand or for my market research team, there's ChatGPT, there's DeepSeek, there's all these other tools on the market. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the best starting point, sort of the most viable product, and then can you talk a little bit about what excellence looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're going to start to see is that a vague or a very generic prompt is going to have, let's just say, a 95% chance of outputting the same answer. So if you look for a generic strategy for millennials and messaging around an ibuprofen, for example, you're going to get essentially 9 out of 10 times the same output. So what we say is this is essentially a threat to creative and unique thinking, because a lot of people are going to be seeing this high token probability output that basically has the same answer. answer. So what I like to do for really deep research is to actually use the Gemini 2.0 research function or the ChatGPT 4.5 deep research. And I like to be incredibly specific with my exact goal. So for instance, I'm looking to create like an empathetic message to lower someone's barrier of purchasing a GLP-1 treatment drug who might not think that they are overweight, something like that. And what you'll start to see is it's bringing in emotion and it's actually picking out additional sources within the output. And then that as a byproduct is refining that answer to be more personalized and specific. So what I like to say is usually it takes you 3 or 4 really strong prompts to get to that end goal answer, like that you've hit the lottery, like the jackpot answer. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 just to get to that point where you realize this is the good output. But really, it's only something we can learn through repetition. So the more we try it, the more we use it, the more we learn like how we can better use it for our goals and for our team's goals. I hope that answers
And
the
so,
question.
Mark, to kind of follow up on that point, so one of the things that I want to call out, just getting back to Verilog's Reveal Vision solution, is that our AI is basically trained exclusively upon dialogue data from the exam room as a starting point. Whereas tools like a ChatGPT, tools like a DeepSeek are basically they're being trained on what's available on the internet, on the worldwide internet, as a starting point. So, Mark, can you talk a little bit about maybe what the pros and cons are between utilizing an AI tool that's been built upon basically the vast repository of what's available on the internet versus an AI tool that's been built upon specific data sets that are relevant to
Yeah.
what you're doing?
Absolutely. So, one of the drawbacks with being trained on the whole entire internet is it's going to have vague outputs for those specific goals you're looking for because it's almost looking through too much noise. So, what happens is you start to see more of a generic idea or output that might not be close to the reality that you as research professionals have come to learn. So, as Verilog's database is literally from the exam room itself, that's going to be the closest source to truth with verbal communications as humans are talking about their disease states and conditions and treatments, as opposed to something that could be pulled from social listening feeds or online discussions or articles, which then are ultimately biased and pulled from the web. Over time, this is going to become even more important because of the influx of new AI content that's being auto-generated and fed back into the web. So definitely something to keep super top of mind with using real data and then supplementing your internal data in to paint that picture.
So to kind of summarize things here, so the question again that kicked off this whole discussion was, are you recommending that we start with Reveal Connect as an AI tool for market research versus tools like GenCanvas, ChatGPT, et cetera? And so, Mark, check me on this, but it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, ChatGPT is a really good starting point to kind of get the lay of the land, but the specificity that's needed to get the level of detail and to avoid hallucinations can be a challenge. It sounds like tools that are built upon the exact, or I guess, did you want to respond to that comment?
No, I was going to say you're right. It's really based on what was fed into it to create that AI, and is it something that you and your brand want to get behind? Because nothing's more powerful than those real conversations like me and you are having right now. But ultimately, it's up to the brand and the team to decide if they want to use that for marketing or out there in the real world.
Yeah, so let's jump back to just the demo here of Reveal Connect. And so again, the benefit to a tool like this, just to echo what Mark just said, is ChatGPT tools like ChatGPT, tools like GenCanvas can be really helpful for getting a lay of the land. So to put it into a little bit more of a marketing perspective, if your question is what's the competitive set for my brand, a tool like a ChatGPT is probably going to be able to answer that and give you a good starting point. But if you have questions related to what happens when a patient's presented with brand X versus brand Y. That's where things get a little bit more challenging because your chat GPTs of the world are parsing through social media conversations, maybe inaccurate information, maybe outdated information that's available on the internet. And so if you want to get an answer that's basically uh, essentially devoid of hallucinations or as close to the source of truth as possible. That's when you want to start thinking about creating your own single source of truth and overlaying AI on top of that to avoid that disinformation and a lot of those hallucinations. So question around to the point about real life point of care discussions versus the whole interwebs as inputs. How can you have the AI assistant leverage both of those and possibly weight the importance of each?
That's a good question. And this is a modern problem that a lot of data scientists are having, and is in some instances it's taking something that's a qualitative or text piece information and trying to give it a score to associate what good or bad looks like. So what I like to say is, if there's an internal LLM that your team has created, by fine-tuning the model, you can change the weight of the output to be more focused on internal data as a main source or external data as a main source. But it even sometimes has to go with actually going through and breaking down a patient journey and going from textual to numerical. So you can then help build some type of table that associates what good or bad looks like. And that's really for you to craft as an output as you're building out these tools and how you want to use them within your team.
So Mark, let's ask a little bit of a more practical question here. So, if I was to basically get into a tool like a Reveal Connect and start asking questions, there are at the end of this demo, we have those third-party marketing data sources. So things like NetBase feeding in tables, things like SEMrush feeding in tables. So we know that essentially this model is being trained on point of care conversations as a starting point, but then it's also starting to be fed in those more quantitative statistics. What would be an example of how, just getting back to that question about leveraging both and weighting the importance of each, can you give an example of maybe a prompt that you would write, let's say around, um, I want to understand how to approach surgeons when it comes to oncology treatment options. Like, can you give us an example of kind of how you would weight something like that and how you would direct the AI to pull from both data sources?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times when I'm bringing in a particular goal, what I'm trying to do is associate a high probability with an output with a particular piece of data. So let's just say, for instance, I'm looking to find the trigger word that primary care physicians use when discussing GLP-1 with patients who are not taking enough vitamins, for example. So what I'll do is I'll put together the prompt to say, hi, I'm looking to establish an understanding on why patients are not taking vitamins with GLP-1, and I want to associate that with inbound traffic from an HCP campaign to cross-reference the language doctors are searching for with the verbiage spoken about in the exam room. And what you're trying to do is pair together some type of digital signal via either the web or via something we know within a patient behavior with that outcome, if you will, and establishing multiple ways of getting to that point. So essentially, think about the biggest part about AI is that end goal is your destination, and there could be multiple paths of getting there. But you want to approach it in such a way that you can learn which path is really bringing you to that goal. And let's say you have an output. You can say, hey, what informed this output? What are the sources you used? And was there a bias that you took into account when giving me this answer? And a lot of times it will reveal itself a little bit. It might even implode and say, actually, I was wrong. I used this research study that I fabricated completely. So it is important to really ask it. Once you get to that good goal, you have something that you think is a golden nugget. Peel back those layers further. How did you get here? What are the sources? Are there biases within the particular authors of this research paper that you used as a large portion for the output? So that's how I would challenge you to keep looking and peeling back those layers. A lot of times it's not just the final answer, there's more details underneath the fold.
Yeah, it's a great point. So, Mark, to kind of boil that down, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is the question why. Why are you giving me this answer? Where did you pull this information from? Did you take into consideration all the direction that I gave you? Um, so I guess my follow-up to that would be, just sticking on this point for another second, is when do you feel confident that the answer you've been given is all-encompassing, is not a hallucination?
When I can verify it, when I can take it from GPT, paste it into Claude, paste it into Gemini, and say, hey, ChatGPT gave me this output. Is this real? Is this true? There's this competitive function into which they want to best each other. So you can kind of let them compete against each other. And that's what I do. And I need to physically see something in writing into the research paper as well. And that's just a me thing because I've seen a tremendous amount of falsified information be produced in terms of research. So always follow it to the source of truth and put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and find those breadcrumbs because that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Just kind of take things back to the Reveal Vision product, just to give folks an example of what that evidence should look like. So on the left side of, sorry, as you get into this demo here, you first get your answer, and then you have this table of evidence beneath. So these are the types of things that you should be looking for when you go to verify an answer that any AI tool gave you. All right, so we have one more. We've got about 10 minutes left in our session here, so happy to keep answering questions as they come in. We have another question here. Can you speak to any common concerns that pharma clients have when pharma clients have expressed when being pitched Verilogue tools and how they have been successfully combated? By far, the two most common questions that we get are, number one, my team already has SharePoint, and we have Copilot licenses on top of SharePoint. That is by far the number one concern that we get. How am I going to go to my procurement team and say, hey, there's this tool called Reveal Connect, there's this tool called Reveal Vision. We think that they're better or more of insights tools than a tool like a SharePoint and a Copilot. So I would say that's the number one concern that we've run into. The second one being, how long does it take to upload and transcribe data and make it AI-ify it essentially, in terms of things like, so as I mentioned, Reveal Vision is built right now primarily upon dialogue data, which is in a transcript format, which makes it very easy for the AI to crunch through because this speaker said this other speaker said this, and that interplay becomes very easy for the AI to interpret. When you get into things like Excel tables, when you get into things like, so the follow-up question was, what's your reply to why Reveal is a better option than SharePoint versus Copilot? I'll answer that in a second. So the second question that we most commonly get, what's the process for basically uploading and transcribing data points that are not just in transcript format, things like PowerPoint slides, things like Excel spreadsheet tables, things like PDFs. That is the truth of the matter is that is a lengthy process right now. Now, within the world of AI, Mark and I just talked about this yesterday. What the reality is of the AI world right now is not what it's going to be an hour from now, is not what it's going to be tomorrow and moving into next week and beyond. So, but right now, one of the biggest challenges is getting AI to basically scan through something like a PDF and say, oh, okay, this is what this chart means on this PDF. The best way to do that right now is using metadata. So if your other research assets are already tagged appropriately with the right metadata to say, this is what's on this slide, or this is what's in this PowerPoint deck. These are like the key synthesized insights from this PowerPoint deck. That makes things a lot easier. If your data is not already structured that way in terms of having that metadata attached, then that's going to be step one. That is typically a co-build, a co-process that we do with our application development team at Verilogue, as well as with the engineers on your side within your organization. Step one is, again, tagging the right metadata to all those different research inputs. And so typically the way that we'll do that is we'll say, okay, what's been generated in 2025? Let's start with that. And then going back to maybe Q3 and Q4 of 2024. So it's a lengthy process to get everything up and tagged appropriately. But the good news is it's a one-time thing. So once Reveal Connect is up and it's running and it's crunching through the research and insights the historical research and insights that you already have, from there, it's just a matter of bringing in new documentation, new reports, on a quarterly or a monthly or a quarterly cadence or whatever it is. So that's sort of our challenge to that second challenge of how do we tag different data sets. To answer your first question around why Reveal is a better option in terms of or as compared to SharePoint and Copilot, Mark, I want to kick it over to you first. Not to put you on the spot to do this question, I have a response, but I'm curious your take on this because I know a lot of the work you've done has been around SharePoint and Copilot within pharmaceutical organizations. So do you want to talk a little bit about what SharePoint and Copilot is good for and maybe what it's not so good for?
Yeah, I really like Copilot and SharePoint, and I think it's great to have the MS 365 kind of suite of apps integrate with those two tools. I do see restrictions and I do see issues with SharePoint knowledge centers that have more than 20 files and more than 20 mega or gigabytes of files. So what happens there is occasionally a competing 300-page PDF might have difficulty competing with an Excel spreadsheet or competing with a Word document to extrapolate essentially what that ideal output should be. So a lot of times when I do specific consulting around SharePoint, it's around specific agents and specific I'd say corralling documents of similar structure and likeness into certain areas, and then micro focusing the prompting and the utility of those SharePoint folders to the specific research teams. And sometimes what you'll see is someone might have like a disease state and then another disease state and then another research paper. But simply by having those three different documents in one SharePoint, you're actually lowering the probability of an accurate output because it's fighting against each other, trying to get something to you quickly. So it's definitely an area that you want to ensure that the files are all isolated and structured in the same way and that everyone is using it likewise in the same way. Because sometimes it's an area where if there's too many different fruits in that basket, you're going to get a really weird tasting pie.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the point around kind of conflicting reports. And so it sounds like cleaning up the data is going to be step one for any of this, whether you're using SharePoint and Copilot or whether you're using Reveal Connect and Reveal Vision. The other thing that I'll point out is our tool. So let me pause this for a second. Mark and I were at the pharmaceutical research conference that happened back in I think it was February or end of January, and we asked folks, what? So you have SharePoint, you have Copilot. So what's sort of your single source of truth when it comes to SharePoint? And the number one response that we got was we have some sort of a cover page for our SharePoint, for SharePoint, where we try to manually synthesize what are the key insights for a brand. That takes a tremendous amount of work. These SharePoint sort of cover pages never look great. There's really no user experience to them whatsoever. And so that's one of the other solutions that one of the other challenges we've been solving for through our platform. So with Reveal Connect, all this has been built in tandem with strategists from Digitas Health. It's been built in tandem with market researchers from, well, I guess I shouldn't say what clients we worked with, but this has all been manufactured for an interface and a UX that's usable and applicable for marketers and for strategists and for market researchers. The other thing that I'll point out is when you start with Copilot, you're kind of on your own for starting to generate prompts, whereas the way that Reveal Connect is being the information here is being generated is based on predetermined prompts as a starting point. So we again worked with strategists from agencies, we worked with marketers and market researchers from the brand side of things to say, what sort of an output would you expect from a tool like this? How can we display the data in a way that's easily accessible and easily actionable for you? And so the prompts that we've built on the back end of this to be able to generate all this information have been vetted, tested. Whereas, if you're using Copilot, typically the scenario is somebody's given a Copilot license and they have no idea where to start. So again, the idea with Reveal Connect is kind of taking you 50 to 60% of the way there, and then you can prompt Reveal Vision on top of that to get any other questions answered that have not already been automatically generated for you. So hopefully that answers your question, or I guess both of your questions. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to myself or to Mark, and we'll be happy to talk in more detail about your specific use case. All right, so with that, we're coming up on time here. We got about 2 minutes left. If there are any final questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll quickly jump back to our concluding slide here. So again, if you're already using a SharePoint and a Copilot, you have no need for products to kind of get you off the ground, but you are looking for strategy and consulting, feel free to reach out to Mark at AI Profits. If you are looking for some products that you feel like could be beneficial to your organization, Maybe you want to challenge the idea that SharePoint and Copilot are sufficient enough. Maybe you want to be involved in building something from the ground up and pioneer something for your brand or for your organization. Feel free to reach out to me, greg.laporte at Verilogue.com. Mark, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, thank you for all your time today. Let me know if there's any questions at all and if I can help.
Sounds good. And folks, as we mentioned at the beginning, if you joined later, if you want to share this session out with the rest of your team, we will be uploading this to our YouTube channel as well as our website. And we'll follow up with an email to give everybody the link. So thank you everybody for your time today. Thank you for your questions. Good luck on your AI journey, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, everyone.